Even in a polyculture, I think it's important to make sure that you have a critical mass of any given crop planted in a particular area. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Critical mass means there's enough of a given crop to be worth walking over to that location and harvesting it. Here's an example of a mulberry tree, which I think even by itself represents enough of a population of mulberry trees to be worth the trip down to this part of the garden. Walking for a couple of minutes, bringing the sheets and the poles. So you lay the sheets on the ground and beat the tree with poles and get the berries down. It's worth it. We don't need necessarily to have 5 mulberry trees in this area. There's enough work here and there's enough harvest here from one plant of this size to be worth it. Bush cherry, on the other hand, if we had a single bush cherry plant here, I don't think that would quite justify a trip down the garden just to harvest one bush's worth. And this will be different for different people. But I find in the case of shrubs and perennials that it's often worth having at least a good half dozen to a dozen, which is what we have here. I'd say there's about 8 plants here, back there, and then across here, of bush cherries. Because now you have, a good 20 minutes of harvesting work for a few people, all in one location, without having to run from one end of the garden to the other to find each bush cherry. So polyculture is striking a balance. You want as much diversity as possible, but you also want to have it be reasonably efficient and worthwhile to harvest. And I think critical mass is an important part of that. In the early years of the garden, in the name of polyculture, I would sometimes plant just a single example of a plant in any given location. And part of that was about learning what worked well in each location. But at this point, I realized that for critical mass, if you have a fairly small plant, you want to have at least enough of a given crop to make it worth your while to come to a particular location to harvest. And in the case of these little red currants, I would not say that a single red currant bush justifies a trip down the garden to go get it. You need a little bit more than just one.